Welcome to Whispers of Darkness, Unveiling Pedro López's Legacy, where we illuminate the dark corners of criminal history with meticulous detail and unnerving facts. I'm your host, Danielle, delving into tales that are as chilling as they are true, and joining me today is a recognized expert on criminal psychology, someone who's spent years studying the minds of the most dangerous individuals. Today, we're venturing into the twisted world of Pedro Alonso López, known infamously as the Monster of the Andes. He's a shadowy figure whose legacy of terror stretches across the rugged landscapes of South America. With a rap sheet claiming the lives of over 110 innocent souls, López's brutal acts earned him a grim place in the annals of infamy. So let's brace ourselves as we embark on this journey into the abyss, piecing together the life of a man who turned from victim to villain and left a trail so horrific it's almost beyond belief. Stay with us as we unfold the story of human nature's darkest depths. Well, today's episode takes us into the formative years of Pedro Alonso López, a man whose name would later send shivers down the spine of an entire continent. Known as the Monster of the Andes, López's story is one of early deprivation and the darkest corners of human behavior. Born in Colombia in 1948, the seventh of 13 children, López's mother, Benilda, was engaged in sex work. His childhood was steeply fraught with neglect and absence of a father figure. Tragically, his own father was killed amidst the political turmoil that plagued Colombia before Pedro was even born. It's hard to fathom, but by the age of 8, López was already showing disturbing behavior, which resulted in him being kicked out of his home when he was caught in an inappropriate act with his sister. This set him on a path of homelessness, wandering the streets of Bogotá, where he faced horrific abuse. It's a brutal beginning that undoubtedly shaped or misshaped his psyche. In an attempt at normalcy, López was later adopted by an American family, but yet again, he faced sexual assault by a teacher, causing him to flee. You really start to see a pattern of violence and abuse that surrounded his early life like a dark cloud. After a stint in prison for auto theft starting in 1969, López was subjected to further abuse, which led him to kill 3 inmates in retaliation. It's chilling to think that this was just the start of an escalation towards a spree of unspeakable crimes. His release from prison in '78 seemed to have unleashed whatever darkness was within him. It's as if his capacity for empathy, or whatever remained of it, was entirely extinguished by his past experiences. López roamed from country to country, and with every step it seems he left behind a trail of suffering and death. The numbers are staggering and frankly difficult to fully comprehend. He boasted of over 300 murders, targeting the most vulnerable: children, street dwellers, and indigenous girls. The calculated coldness of his actions is something that's hard to reconcile with any notion of humanity we might want to hold on to. The profound tragedy here is not only the lives he extinguished, but the consistent failure of society to intervene at any of the numerous points along his tragic arc. From the moment of his birth into violence and neglect to the systematic abuse inflaming his already troubled existence, Pedro López's life serves as a dark testament to the making of a monster. Which begs the question, how much of what López became was innate, and how much was forged from the crucible of his environment and experiences? It's a puzzling conundrum and a sobering reflection of the importance of our societal and familial structures. It's a troubling legacy, isn't it? And I believe it reveals as much about the darkest potential within us as individuals as it does about the collective failure to protect and nurture those who are most at risk. After his stint behind bars, Pedro López embarked on what would become a nefarious trek across South America. Now he claimed an alarming number of victims, over 100 young lives, primarily targeting those who lived on the fringes of society, the street children, the vulnerable. What's truly haunting is the narrow evasion of retribution López experienced when caught by an indigenous tribe in Peru, where he was moments away from what many might say was a deserving fate. It's chilling. Absolutely. And the way he managed to slip through the hands of justice when the Ayacuchoan tribe handed him over to the authorities, who inexplicably let him go, that's a major point of contention. Because instead of being punished, he was simply expelled from Peru, and afterwards, his dark journey didn't just continue, it escalated. It's this crucial lapse in the system that possibly emboldened López even more. It's this stark reality of many missing persons cases from that era. Young girls started disappearing more frequently, and with every vanished child, the shadow of López's dark presence loomed larger. Witness reports, the pattern of abductions, every trail left cold until nature itself intervened, revealing the grim truth. Yes, it was nature that uncovered the depth of his depravity. His methodology, the same all along, luring victims with trinkets, then enacting his vile intentions. It wasn't just the act, but the premeditated ruse to gain trust, which makes it all the more disturbing. Each disappearance added to the nightmare narrative that was slowly being pieced together, but it was only after his capture that the true scale of his horror became known. And that, undoubtedly, would shape not only the regional perception on missing persons, but it had repercussions worldwide on how we understand and deal with serial killers. His actions and the initial lack of intervention echo through time, a stark reminder of the vulnerability of society's marginalized and the importance of diligent law enforcement. It was a case that had stumped authorities for far too long. There had been whispers, fears, and unexplained disappearances of young girls, which turned communities into landscapes of dread. But it wasn't until the hand of nature swept across Ambato, Ecuador, that the chilling truths began to surface. Literally. You see, April 1980 brought with it devastating flash floods to the region. It was in the wake of this natural disaster that the land divulged its darkest secrets. Displaced earth and ravaged lands uncovered the shallow graves of multiple young girls, victims previously swallowed by silence and unsolved mysteries. It was a grim discovery that couldn't be ignored, a turning point that prompted police to revisit closed files and reconsider dismissed leads afresh. These were not merely statistics on a missing persons report. They were daughters, sisters, friends, and now they were found, but peace was far from being restored. This was the thread that would soon unravel the monstrous tapestry woven by Pedro López. Imagine a local woman on a typical market day, a scene so ordinary yet about to become the backdrop for an extraordinary altercation. Carvina Poveda, can we perhaps understand the terror she must have felt? She's with her 12-year-old daughter, Marie. They're simply living their lives, when López decided to strike, to attempt another abduction right there in broad daylight. But this time, fate intervened. The onlookers, the shopkeepers, and passers-by weren't just witnesses. They became protectors, defenders. They overpowered this man, this predator, and held him captive until the authorities arrived. This community, they took a stand. Could they possibly have known then that they were nabbing one of the most prolific serial killers? When faced with the might of the law, López's silence in custody was as cold as the eyes of a predator biding his time. But every facade has its cracks, right? Enter Police Captain Pastor Cordova, cleverly disguised as a fellow inmate, sharing a jail cell with López. Cordova, in that confined space, cultivated a chilling bond with this man, encouraging López to spill his ghastly secrets. It was a sinister move, but necessary, and soon the floodgates of confession burst open. López began to boast about his crimes, numbers so large they're hard to comprehend. Over 300 lives claimed, he said. His method was simple, calculated: entice with a trinket, overpower, and then strangulation. It's a pattern that's hard to stomach, to think about the real lives behind each of those tragedies. But more horrific details were to come as López led the authorities to the burial sites of 53 victims. 53 daughters Ecuador had lost to this man's hands. This marked the beginning of a full circle of justice for at least some of the 110 confirmed murders in Ecuador, an ending that none would have foreseen amidst nature's fury and a community's resilience. Well, What's truly perplexing about the Pedro López case, and this sort of defies all logic, is the sentence he received. A mere 16 years for the confirmed murders of 110 young girls, possibly one of the greatest miscarriages of justice in modern history, wouldn't you say? Absolutely, it's incomprehensible. Here you have a man whose heinous crimes shook the very core of South American society, and yet the punishment hardly seems commensurate with the scale of his atrocities. I think what equally baffles me is that this was the maximum prison sentence available in Ecuador for murder at the time. It's that disconnect between law and moral outrage that sticks in the craw. Surely, someone, somehow, in the Ecuadorian justice system would foresee the potential ramifications of such a light sentence for such grievous crimes. It was as if the system was ill-equipped to handle criminals like López. And to add insult to injury, he wasn't even made to serve the full sentence. He got out 2 years early, for good behavior of all things. It feels like a horrific parody. A man responsible for the nightmares of perhaps hundreds of families is rewarded for good behavior. Good behavior? Yeah, the irony is as dark as it gets. His release was like a slap in the face to the concept of justice. And then he's deported to Colombia. And what happens? He's momentarily detained as an illegal immigrant, but they couldn't hold him for his past crimes. The lack of inter-country coordination and legal jurisdiction limitations are just staggering. I shudder at the thought. And then things took another bizarre turn, didn't they? Declared insane and committed to a mental hospital, only for the very next turn in this twisted tale to release him into society once again. And all it took was a laughably measly bail of just $70. It reads like a storyline ripped straight from some macabre thriller, not the cold reality of the judicial process. He joins society and expects him to check in with authorities voluntarily, as if a person who had evaded and manipulated the system would suddenly adhere to a gentleman's agreement. It was as if Pedro López was this malevolent Houdini. And just like one of Houdini's great escapes, López vanished almost as quickly as he emerged. Scarcely seen since his release, his shadow lingers in recent unsolved cases, which some speculate might bear his signature methodology. A chilling thought that this predator might still be hunting in the shadows. Right, and it leaves you wondering, doesn't it? Did he just blend into the background, a ghost among the masses? Or did his past finally catch up to him somewhere outside the public eye? It's a stark reminder of the limits of our justice system and how, sometimes, its loopholes allow for a dark figure like Pedro López to slip through its grasp and into the annals of infamy. One thing's for sure, though. There's been a profound failure at numerous points in dealing with López. From underestimating the gravity of his crimes and his capacity for recidivism to botching his surveillance post-release. Perhaps the scariest part of all this is not knowing just how many Pedro Lópezes are out there, slipping through the cracks because of these same system failures. Unsettling is the word. In this case, it's the kind that keeps you up at night, makes you question the very society we live in, the rules we're governed by, and where, along the way, the system can take such a nightmarish turn. All right, shifting from the grim tale of his crimes to the shadow that looms even now, it's hard to talk about Pedro López without touching on the kind of legacy he leaves behind, not just in human tragedy, but in criminal history. Absolutely, it's as chilling as it is puzzling. One has to wonder, with a man like López, who slipped through so many cracks in the justice system, where on earth could he be right now? After vanishing post-release, his whereabouts are the stuff of dark speculation. And speaking of dark, the once noted entry in the Guinness World Records as the most prolific serial killer, that's been removed. The record books were pretty much glorifying murder by keeping him in there, turning these heinous acts into some kind of morbid scoreboard. They made the right call. There's no place in society for turning such horrifying acts into statistics for record charts. The real focus should be on the victims and ensuring that justice is served and remembered. But this does bring us to an unsettling point. López's case left many questions unanswered, and with his current status unknown, those questions persist,
clouding his legacy with mystery. You think about the potential sightings over the years, the murder in Tunja in 2012 that had his signature. It's like he's become something of a bogeyman, leaving us to question whether he's changed his ways, or if he's unbelievably still out there doing harm. It's this kind of uncertainty that creates not just a legacy, but a cautionary tale. A monstrous figure that, despite all the efforts of law enforcement, remains elusive, and a stark reminder of the importance of international cooperation when it comes to justice and public safety. Absolutely spot on. This is exactly what makes Whispers of Darkness such a necessary dialogue. It's an ongoing conversation, one where the final chapter remains unwritten. Could he still resurface? Could justice still be served? Or are we left with the haunting notion that, in some corners of the world, the monster of the Andes is still more than just a whisper? As our exploration into the harrowing legacy of Pedro López draws to a close, we're reminded of the grim capabilities of human nature. From a troubled childhood to becoming the monster of the Andes, the path of destruction he carved eclipses words. His gruesome acts shook the very foundations of society and had us questioning the shortcomings of the judicial system. I want to express a heartfelt thank you to our expert guest for bringing invaluable perspective and depth to this dark narrative. Your insights have certainly illuminated the innumerable facets of this complex case. To our devoted listeners, your curiosity fuels our conversations. Keep the lantern of inquiry burning bright as we delve into more enigmas lurking in the shadows in upcoming episodes of Whispers of Darkness. Remember, the tales that stalk the fringes of reality often have the most to teach us. Until next time, stay vigilant and don't let the whispers of darkness fall on deaf ears.